Great to have, great to be here with SME for Labour again. Another conference, another set of fringes. We're really grateful in community to be working with Ibrahim and the entire team in SME for Labour, and in particular, I just want to say a big thank you to Jonathan. I think I don't know if he's even here, but he had a lot on his plate this year, and it's been really fantastic to work with him. And thank you all, of course, for joining us, and to our speakers that I'll introduce in just a moment. My name is Maya Ilani. I'm the Campaigns and Political Officer at Community Trade Union. We're proud to be a trade union for self-employed people. We're proud to be a trade union that's affiliated to the Labour Party, and I hope that this event will bring those two things together. So the title of our event is 4 million votes on the line. How can Labour win over the self-employed? We've got a fantastic panel with us to discuss this question. But before I introduce my speakers, our speakers, I just want to say that ahead of this panel, we worked with Chris Curtis and the team in Opinion on commissioning a polling to see what self-employed people actually think about the Labour Party. For many years, it was the case that the Tory party seemed to be the natural home for self-employed people and for entrepreneurs. But I just want to share a taste of the results that we found in the polling. You can find the full polling online, but just a few pieces of data. So I would say the headline is that self-employed people are turning to Labour from Conservative, which is fantastic news. We found that 31% of self-employed people would now back Labour, and only 25 would vote Tory. Now, in 2019, just 3 years ago, 36% of self-employed people voted Tory, and only 25 voted Labour, backed Labour then. We asked them a few other questions. Which party do they think would be most supportive and would protect self-employed people's rights? And on that question, 46% said Labour would be best for self-employed people. It's more than double the number of people that thought that the Tories would be best. That was around 20 or 21%, if I'm not mistaken. And another question is, which party they think, when in government, would be best for self-employed people? 27% said that they think the Conservative would be the best, and 36% thought Labour would be best for self-employed people in government. So a really encouraging set of results for the Labour Party. And now I would like to introduce our panel and hear from each of our panelists what they make of the results and kind of their take in more than 280 characters, I guess. So starting with Chris Curtis over there, head of political polling in Opinion. Next to him is sitting Helena Dollimore. She's the parliamentary candidate for Hastings Rye, seated with more than 11,000 self-employed people, so very relevant. And next to me is Christian Wakeford, the MP for Very South. Hello. And now, fashionably late, but just on time to be introduced, is the head of Research Policy and External Relation in Community, Kate Dearden, who just survived a compositing session. Welcome. Okay. Let's get going. So I'm going to start with you, Chris. It would be really interesting to hear what you think of these results.
Thank you, and thank you the community, of course, for hosting. But I think probably more importantly than that, thank you to community, given the topic we're talking about, thank you to community and other trade unions that are now taking up a really important role of representing and organising around self-employed people in the UK. The kind of works, the kind of schemes that we've put in place by trade unions in this area, I think is fantastic and really looking after, really helping to support workers. We really do need trade union support. In terms of this research, I'll just pick up on I'll just talk about a couple of the stats that I think are a bit surprising in a minute. But one thing I'll mention beforehand is just setting out a little bit of the context in terms of the wider polling that I've been doing. where I think self-employed people fit into that. I always have to say, as a pollster, I often sound a little bit technical and cold when I'm talking. I do know I'm talking about real people, but unfortunately that's something that comes with the job. But we got quite obsessed studying in politics about talking about the big Brexit divide, the big divide about whether people are social conservatives or social liberal. Are you living in the red wall or are you living in the blue wall? Are you an older voter or a younger voter? And the way that affects your voting intention. But one of the things that really hasn't been spoken about enough, and actually a lot of the data that we work on shows that this is incredibly important, is economic insecurity. Actually, this is still one of the biggest drivers of voting intention. People who are more economically insecure still don't trust the Conservatives, and think the Labour Party is best placed to look after their economic interests because they're much more economically secure and much more likely to be Conservative voters. I think, alongside that, when you look at not just the way people are currently voting, but the kind of voters that the Labour Party needs to gain in order to get a majority in the next election, the kind of voters they should be targeting are, broadly speaking, more economically insecure voters, but economically insecure socially conservative voters. It's the kind of people who in the last general election decided to vote for the Conservatives because the Conservatives were the party of Brexit, but now they're much more concerned about the economic insecurity which is dominating their day-to-day lives. And I start by saying that because I think lots of people identify lots of self-employed people to fall into that camp. There are lots of self-employed people who are particularly economically insecure, and they're looking for more support from the government. And that was one of the key findings from our research. And we go from a position our polling where at the last general election, we've already started to see the impact of this. Because in the last general election, the Conservatives had a 9-point lead among self-employed people. Labour now holds a greater than 6-point lead. So that's a big shift that's happened over a very short space of time. But obviously, clearly, there's still a lot more work that the Labour Party needs to do. And from my perspective, I think that needs to involve putting in more policies to make self-employed workers feel more economically secure, feel more secure in their workplace, in their working lives. Around policies, and I'm sure the other panellists will speak to ideas that they think should be put in place, but around policies to do with sick pay or maternity leave. But I think that's the framing that Labour needs to go on if it wants to cement this polling shift that it's had among self-employed workers, because this is a group of voters that should be in the Labour camp, but at the last election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now moving to Helena, who has a very real specific challenge in your seat where you have more than 11,000 people who are self-employed. What do you make of the results?
Yeah, I think really promising to see that Labour is making progress among the self-employed. But I think the first place that we have to start from is that people who are self-employed are also still voters. And although Chris has outlined, some of the characteristics that are disproportionately felt in them, I think we also shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, if you are self-employed, you still rely on being able to get a GP appointment when you need one. You still rely on having a great school for your kids locally. You still rely on the potholes in the road being filled so that you can get to work. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the extent to which having great public services, which we know have been decimated over the last 12 years of Tory rule, and how that is just bringing so many parts of our daily life to a standstill at the moment, that inability to call an ambulance if something happens to you. Let's not forget that that's really important too. In Hastings and Rye we have over 10,000 self-employed people, and that covers a huge range of different industries, different jobs, different types of skills. I can see that we've got a pub landlady in the room here today. We have a lot of pub landlords and landladies in Hastings. We have a lot of artists and musicians who are also self-employed. We also have women who run salons, small business owners who are then self-employed running different beauty services. And never forget that there are so many high streets up and down Britain, I think, that particularly over the years of austerity when shops were closing up and down our high streets, many of those high streets were only kept alive by women running small businesses along our high streets. And it's women business owners that kept the pubs going and kept the salons going. And I think during the pandemic, these issues have really come to the fore. We've seen, all of the focus on the missing million during the pandemic. It's only because of the campaigning that Community does, that other trade unions have been doing to really bring these issues up the public agenda, that we are talking more about the issues. I think if you are self-employed, you are always fundamentally going to accept that in exchange for more flexibility in your life, you don't get perhaps all of the safety nets that come with being an employee of an organisation. But the question I think for us today is what could a Labour government do to make sure that there is some kind of basic safety net that gives everyone that basic level of services that they can rely on. That starts with public services, as I've said, but also it's things that disproportionately affect some groups of people. I've had points in my life as a woman where I've had the option to go self-employed. What has always put me off is that there is no maternity leave. If you are self-employed, you get statutory maternity pay, which I don't know if anyone in this room knows how much that is. It's £150 a week. You can't do much with £150 a week. You also, if the worst were to happen and you were to have to take sick leave, there is no sick pay if you are self-employed. So what can Labour do, a Labour government, to kind of provide some of these basic safety nets is really important. And also things like harassment at work. If you are self-employed and you are harassed by a customer or a client or something like that, there is no recourse for you. If you are a musician playing at a gig and somebody is harassing you, unless that's a criminal offence, which we know is actually a tiny proportion of cases, there is no recourse, there's no HR for you to go to. And I know Annalise has been talking today in her speech about how we can create that kind of third-party reporting system to give people some of that security. So I think the question for us today is, what are the basics that the Labour government could provide? And also then going a step further and recognising that many of our self-employed people provide so many jobs as well themselves, running small businesses. How can Labour in power facilitate that and make that easier for them and ultimately incubate more small businesses up and down our high streets? And there's some brilliant examples of Labour councils who are doing work in this space. Labour-run Brent Council are creating more affordable workplaces. If you have high streets that are empty, make those places where small businesses can run workspaces that are affordable, bringing in new jobs, generating new income for the town. Thinking about apprenticeships and how you can reduce some of the red tape. There are many self-employed people who would love to take on an apprentice or give someone from a state school work experience, but they're put off by the amount of red tape that they have to do. So how can we facilitate that as Labour councils and Labour in power and make that easier? There's lots we could do, but I think the fundamentals for me are about what are the safety nets that Labour can provide in terms of every worker, whether you are self-employed or employed by a company, and how can we make those better so that everyone's got a basic level to fall back on, but also not forgetting that self-employed people will do well with great public services as well, and that is what a Labour government will deliver.
Thank you very much, Helena. That was really interesting. I think a lot of the stuff you mentioned, we hear, Kate could say more about this, but it's something that our self-employed members raise a lot. And Chris can also say that in the survey, when we asked what are the main concerns people have about being self-employed, this lack of safety net, which maybe people who are employed, I'm not going to say taken for granted, but it is there. It's a main concern for self-employed people. So just to plug here, the campaign the community is running sick pay for all. It's great to see that the Labour Party already committed to it in the New Deal for Working People, to extend sick pay to the self-employed and to do it in the first 100 days in government, which is a great start. But there's way more to do, as we said, maternity pay, parental leave, etc. Christian, I guess I want to ask what you think about the survey, but I would also want you to kind of include what did you make of Chris comment about voters not just being a box of being the blue wall or red wall, pro-Brexit, pro-Remain, but there's real material economic concerns that drive them to vote, and also what Helena said about kind of the ultimately everyone rely on public services, whatever they do for a living. Over to you.
Thank you, Maya, and so it's great to be here for what is my first ever Labour conference speech. So thank you, everyone. If I'd have done that, I'd get back with something I'd done it earlier. But I think in regards to what Chris said, I think you really do strike the chord, because in terms of polling, in terms of data, we always look at the figures. Behind every single figure, every single percentage is a person. And I think that's where the Labour Party is much stronger than the Tories, because we try to humanise that element, we try to talk about the people. And that is really the entire message that has to come out of how we can actually support the greengrocer's daughter who wants to become Prime Minister, how we can support the sparky, the plumber, the hairdresser, the salon owner. All these are people who all need different levels of support or different policies to help them thrive. And when we look at a Conservative government at the moment who famously in 2019 said they were the party for working people, well, they're not. Everything they've done since then, which is ultimately why I'm here now, has come back on that promise made by the then Prime Minister, and I'm glad to have been part of removing him from office. But everything they've done, whether it's been attacking workers' rights, attacking fire and rehire, every single thing has just slowly been eroding workers' rights and ultimately self-employed rights. We only need to look to IR35, and it's taken 2.5 years of Conservative government to finally try to do something about it, and even then they got it up. So, in terms of the people, we do need to go much further, like Helena said, whether it's maternity pay, parental leave, sick pay, but the harassment elements to talk about. There are so many gaps in support for people wanting to be self-employed, or those who are self-employed, who ultimately leave the profession, leave the career, the company that they love and strive so hard to set up, put their blood, sweat, tears, and perhaps their entire life on the line to do something they were passionate about. And they're leaving it behind because there's a government that is refusing to support them, refusing to help them. And we only needed to look to the pandemic, the 3 million excluded who had literally no support and were begging from friends. The videos I was linked to every single day, my inbox every single day of people saying, we want help. It wasn't the bankers saying, actually, can we have the cap of our bonuses lifted, please? No, it was people saying, we just want some money to pay our mortgage, our rent, actually put food on the tables, so we don't have to worry about how our kids are going to go to school hungry. And that was a daily occurrence, and the government just ignored them for the entire pandemic, and even now there are companies that should be thriving, surviving, and they're just no longer there. Our town centres are now ghost towns, and it's because the self-employed have had to leave it because there's no economy there to essentially support them. So I think when we look at the data, it basically shows that there's a government that doesn't support small business owners. It barely supports businesses unless you're a large corporate firm, and we've seen that only just the other day with the budget, non-budget. But like I said before, when we're looking at what we can do for 4 million people, first of all, we need to listen to them. And it's all well and good coming to an event and saying, well, we hear you, but we're not listening to you. And I think we are doing that as a party, which is start. But we also need to start moving forward with those policies. And thankfully, like you were saying, Maya, the first 100 days, trying to commit to some of those changes, which will be fundamental for people not only keeping their business, but being able to actually thrive in it. Not having to worry about going to work ill, and being able to actually just have the right to be sick. The fact we're even discussing that is actually just really, really depressing. So I think in terms of where we are now, there's a lot more we can be doing. But when small businesses and entrepreneurs are ultimately the lifeblood and the backbone of our economy, that's what we need to be supporting. It's not the bankers, it's not anyone on £150,000 who needs a tax cut. It's what tax incentives can we potentially do or tax make to help someone go from working 9 to 5 to same party. If you want to set up your business, we'll back you. It's not going to be a new investment area or enterprise zone or Freeport or whatever we want to call them this week. But what can we do to get people setting up a shop or setting up a hot desk in a local enterprise centre to be able to make that first step to being an entrepreneur, to having their own business, and to ultimately investing in their own community. So if you spend £1 in that local business, that's £1 that's ultimately going to circle around in the local economy, whether it's buying school uniforms, groceries, etc. If you do that with Amazon, well, who knows where it goes. But ultimately, we need to hold close to the tradition of a party that was set up by the workers for the workers, and it shouldn't matter if you're employed or self-employed. You're a worker, and a party like Labour should be there to ultimately represent you, give them policies that will give you that backbone, that safety net, to allow you to grow, thrive, and ultimately succeed. Because when small business succeeds, the country succeeds. So I think we all need to be doing a lot more of that. But ultimately, I think when we look at the data, it all comes down, like you said, Chris, to security. And there are so many people, I think it was 46%, so the biggest problem they've got with self-employment is that lack of security, whether it is maternity rights, holiday pay, sick pay, or the lack of being able to invest, or whether or not you're even going to be able to take a regular wage home. There's just no security. So anything we can do to try to mitigate issues like that, especially when it comes to healthcare, really do need to be jumped upon, grab with both hands and say, well, actually, we are going to help you, but ultimately we're going to allow you to help yourself as well. So I think we've got an absolute fantastic opportunity to do that as a party now, especially when the lines are becoming clearer, especially with the kind of quasi-budget, if you will, where ultimately there's nothing there to support anyone. We only need to look at the tax cuts or the lack of them to help anyone. So when we look at battleground issues or battleground seats, whether it's red wall, blue wall, all voters, Brexit voters, there's a very clear message, and it's ultimately that there's one party that's on your side, and it's not a good one. So I think we all need to be sending that message home to the high streets, to anywhere where anyone wants to set up their own business, and the only way they're going to succeed is with Keir Starmer in number 10.
Thank you for this. I'm going to turn to Kate in just a moment. I'm just giving a heads up to everyone in the room that after Kate we're going to take questions from the audience. So maybe start thinking about what you would like to ask, because it would be turning to you after Kate. I guess, Kate, my main question for you is, were you surprised by the results, John? What did you make of them?
No, I wasn't surprised. The figures in the self-employed population in the UK has declined by almost 1 million. We were 5 million strong a few years ago. I say we because I feel like our members here today, we can speak in unity. We were 5 million strong to just 4.2 million in the labour market today, and that's because of the way that a lot of self-employed workers have been treated throughout the pandemic, the lack of support, as Chris alluded to, but also that they've got a government that's not on their side, that's not standing up for them, that's not introducing very much needed and overdue employment rights that a lot of the self-employed workforce obviously need and that we've spoken to already. And I think the findings show that what the section of the workforce do desperately need and what they're looking for, and what our members tell us weekly, many in this room today, weekly and monthly, and what we've been really proud to work with the party quite closely on. And I think they are and should be a very key voter base for the party as we've spoken about. And I think at points, sole traders and freelancers have been overlooked politically from the Labour Party. It's not really been seen as a comfortable conversation, or perhaps not Labour's traditional voter base, and that's an error, it's a mistake to make. I don't think it's a luxury personally that the party has ever had, but definitely not now. And I think a lot of that is to do with sort of the false perception of what people think the self-employed workforce are and what they do. A lot of our members, as mentioned, some here, work across a real diverse range of sectors and industries all across the UK economy. From trading, consultancy, professional drivers, arts, photography, you name it, our members do it. And what we hear from them is that they love that way of working. They love the work they do, that flexibility, that individuality, and the creativity and responsibility ultimately it brings. But there are also a lot of difficulties that our members face every single day. A lot of them are low-paid workers, and they need a government that not only stands up for their rights, that supports unions and supports our organising efforts to ensure that we can create better terms and conditions for self-employed. Obviously, collective bargaining is not a thing, but how do we raise the bar for our self-employed members so they can fight for better pay in their rates and when they engage with clients? So how do we support good quality and well-paid self-employment, which unions have always fought for, us at community, but also across the board. Those unions in the creative industries, in journalism and broadcasting, who have a proud legacy of standing up for the self-employed. Now's the time for all of us to come together and really deliver that new deal for the self-employed from the Labour government. And I think it's great news at polling. Labour's moving in the right direction. We're really proud to work with them on that. And so that's swing. I think we just need to build on it and speak to that section of the workforce. 4 million votes up for grabs, and it's not rocket science. It's bread and butter issues. It's sick pay, it's better pay, it's building that pay, it's financial security and stronger safety nets. It's what we all believe in, and it's what a section of the workforce is still not entitled to in the 21st century. We have to solve that. I think it starts with sick pay. It's an absolute basic. If you are too poorly to work, you should not be forced to do it. During the pandemic, we've got a government that did create a scheme for self-employed workers to isolate, and that was paid for through local councils, but it was set up quite uniquely by the government. So it shows if there's a political will to do it, they will do it. But clearly that only goes so far, which is why we need Labour in power to do on a long-term sustainable basis for this section of the workforce. We heard in Angela's speech this morning her reference to standing up for the self-employed. Great news. Let's hear more of it across the front bench, but I think it's excellent that Labour is committed to standing up for the self-employed. In their new deal for working people, which we launched last year at conference, and do look it up if you haven't seen it yet, is a really strong commitment on extending sick pay to the self-employed. And I think Labour knows how vital it is in not only nurturing opportunities for working people, creating environments for innovation and boosting local economies, but also injecting that extremely valuable creativity that the self-employed and freelance workforce bring to our country and to our economies. And I think if we can combine all of this, if Labour can really sort of continue to speak to the section of the workforce and the changes that we can make to the day-to-day work that our members experience and the difficulties that we can address, we really can sort of see that growth and get that 5 million workforce strong self-employed section back and continue to let it thrive and see it grow. So we'll continue to the community to represent our members and that growing section of the union that's really diverse and really proud to work with, but also work with Labour to continue to develop that offer for the next election and deliver for the self-employed so they get the fair treatment and the support they need and deserve. So thank you all for coming today. It's great to see so many on board with us, and let's really importantly continue this conversation outside this room into CLPs with all MPs across the party so we can really make that difference in cement